Right, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Colin Shirek. We're at Day Camp, Day Wines in Dundee. It's Thursday, March 12th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining us today, Colin.
Thanks for having me.
First question, most important question. Why wine?
I knew that you were going to open with that question, and so I've been thinking about it, and I don't really have a singular answer. I know there are a lot of moments in my life where I've been like, oh, wine. One of the most poignant moments happened in Anderson Valley in California, and I was tasting wine at a place called Lazy Creek, and it's a very small family winery, and we were tasting in the cellar. Their kids' toys were everywhere. There was like a nice couple cheeses on the bar, and it was really small and family oriented, and I just thought to myself, I want this. This is cool. This is really cool. So I think family, I think small volumes and intimacy are the things that brought me to wine. I dropped out of grad school in 2004, and I was looking for something to do. I was studying sculpture at the time, and I started working in a cafe and drinking lots of wine and getting involved with the wine list and wine buying, and that was in the Bay Area, so every weekend I'd go out and taste wine, and just got really involved in that sort of lifestyle, and sort of like really enjoyed the locales where grapes were being grown. So I thought, this is a good sort of art and science kind of like world that I could really feel comfortable in. So yeah.
Tell me about that kind of like learning wine that way, building a wine list, being involved on that end. What did you learn about wine that made you want to learn more about wine?
Well, just that I knew so little, and the more you learn, the less you know. So there's this sort of abyss of wine knowledge to have. So yeah, I don't get bored of it ever, which is awesome. So yeah, that, and just the acquisition of experience and knowledge, and also kind of food and family, and sitting down at the table with delicious food and delicious wine, and that sort of aspect of communality that's really cool.
So tell me, from there, where did you go next?
Well, so then I moved to New Zealand, and I got a sort of a graduate diploma is what it's called. It's basically a post-baccalaureate in viticulture and enology at Lincoln University, and spent the better part between 2007 and 2012 bouncing between Oregon and New Zealand, which I'll probably get to more later.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why Oregon?
Well, not to sound too much like a fanboy, but because of Steve Dorner from Christum. One of people always talk about those aha wines that you have. One of my aha wines was a Calera that Steve had made, and then I realized that Steve wasn't at Calera anymore; he was at Christum. And then I had the fortune of working for a couple places in New Zealand that had their winemakers had interned at Christum. So in 2008, I got the opportunity to go to Christum and to work with Steve, which was pretty awesome. It was a really, really, really fun vintage.
Tell me about that. Tell me about your first time in Oregon making wine.
It was cool. I mean, so to back up just a tiny bit, I do have family in Oregon. I'd spent the summers here my whole time growing up. So I had this preconception of what Oregon was. And I'd never really been out to the valley. I'd never really interacted with the viticulture out here. So my first time being here, I was just blown away with the kindness, with the sense of community, and the sense of kind of there was a unique, special vibe to the place during that time for me. And 2008 was kind of a really like a good vintage, high quality vintage. I think it might be hyped up a little bit, but the wines are still opening up, so we're not sure how they're going to taste in 10 years. But it was really cool to have my first vintage in Oregon be 2008 because of that.
I want to back up a little bit, just sort of talking about going from the idea of I enjoy wine, I like drinking wine, I like wine lists, to like actually going to another country
Right.
to get a degree and
Right,
to
yeah,
actually coming back to Oregon. So
Sure.
tell me about that leap from
Sure.
into production.
Sure. So being a maker already, being someone that loved to work with my hands and build stuff and figure out how things are put together, that I just figured like, oh, I'll make wine my medium, basically. Like I'll stop putting duct tape on things and being like a weird artist and just start working with grapes and just do the same thing, but just be able to drink it afterwards, So that's why I still wanted to make something. And why New Zealand? I looked at all the education available. I looked at Davis, I looked at Fresno, I looked at Adelaide, and I didn't want to go to school for 5 years to get my degree. I wanted to get going. So I got in touch with Glenn Creasy at Lincoln, who is an absolute wizard, legend person in the wine industry. He's amazing. His wife Kristen is amazing too. He said, "Yeah, come down and learn how to make wine in New Zealand." And I wanted to go for a trip. I wanted to get out of the U.S. and broaden my horizons a little bit. So that was an incredible time.
You talk about having preconceptions of Oregon. I assume at this point you also had some sort of preconceptions of making wine, of what it was like to make wine. Tell me about the kind of shock, I guess, or what surprised you about what it actually takes to make wine?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't really have a lot of preconceptions about how to make wine because I really didn't know how to make wine. I mean, I had no idea. Like I was pretty much as green as you could get. So, and then having insight into Steve's process right away, it felt so natural to me the way that he makes wine, and it felt so intuitive and straightforward that it made so much sense. And then so the shock came subsequent vintages later when I was working at more traditional winemaking places and places that I hate saying like follow a recipe, but that tick all the boxes, that go through everything, and don't sort of just improvise along with the grapes. So that was really my shock, was like, wait, what do you do? No, don't do that. Like, I already had these preconceptions from working at Christum that I was like, no, this is how you do it. Like, so that was the shock for me. Up until then, I was kind of just wandering around like a doe in the woods. It was pretty cool.
Tell me about the 2008 vintage then, and about what role you played, and sort of like you talk about the learning that style.
Right, right.
What did you take away from that you eventually wanted to take for your own project?
I mean, a lot of everything. Like I'll happily say I steal from Steve. Sort of his method of always being present for the wine without having to manipulate the wine. Like always being there to make sure that if the wine starts heading towards a cliff, he can kind of steer it away from that cliff without having to be like, this is how I want you to be. Kind of lets the grapes speak for themselves. He has so many little euphemisms, like Yogi Berra almost, but one is that he's like, I'm not a winemaker, I'm a yeast farmer. Like I don't I don't do anything. I just make sure, like, to create a situation that produces beneficial results.
Something good could happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like so if you create a situation where positive results can happen, then you don't have to do as much to the wine. I'll never say wine makes itself, because I don't believe that. But I think the less you can do to it, the less you stay out of the way, the better.
So you talk about 2007 to 12. You're kind of bouncing back and forth. You've got the internship at Christum. You're working in. So tell me about where else you were working in that time and kind of what happened next.
Well, so the first job I had was at Felton Road in New Zealand, and it was in the vineyard. And so right out of the gate, I got a real good sort of handle on like touching grapes, touching vines, like really, knowing what that's all about. Being in the field, like seeing how grapes grow. So that was a huge education for me. And it was really fun too, being in another country and, just waking up every day at 6 in the morning and, working your ass off, coming home exhausted, but like really getting a lot of good feeling out of, the sort of zenning out on the monotonous work of grape growing. That was really fun. And then, so after Christum, I got a permanent gig at Domaine Drouhin, and I was a cellar supervisor at Domaine Drouhin for 2 years, almost to the day. So I worked the 10 and 11 vintages at Domaine Drouhin, and it was really there that I learned perseverance. The 10 and 11 vintages were very difficult, but in my opinion, produced some of the most beautiful wine that I've drunk from Oregon. I really love the acidity. I really love the structure, and sort of the volume of the wine. It's not shouting at you. It's sort of acoustically balanced, and so that I learned so much about how to sort of like mix the sounding board on a wine, which was cool. It was really fun, and also learning how to make Chardonnay from Veronique was incredible. I love Chardonnay, and I love the way she makes wine. So. That was really fun.
Tell me about how she differed from Steve in terms of winemaking approach.
Well, I mean, not a whole lot. There aren't that many ways to make wine. Like people always tout their differences, but in reality, you still have to do all the same things. It's still grapes. It's still, So I think accentuating our similarities is more important than accentuating our differences. Her method was a little bit more conventional, but really not that much. And I think the energy that I got from both of them was don't worry too much about it. Be there for it and be present, but don't freak out. If you're worried about something, just take a day or two to think about it, and then go from there. So that's cool.
Even in difficult vintages like those.
Yeah, even especially there's always like 2 or 3 weeks before harvest when you're like, what is going to happen, and you're waiting for the hammer to drop, and so those are the hard weeks. But after that happens, you just start working and you start doing it, and once you get going on it, it's fine.
Talking about learning perseverance, was there a particular moment or particular issue that you dealt with during one of those vintages that was particularly like it made an imprint on you?
I mean, without getting too much like I think most winemakers would be lying if they said they don't have a moment every vintage where they're like, this is the last time I ever want to do this. I haven't slept in a full night's sleep in a month and a half, and I've been working 90 hours a week, and it really tests your physical strength and your kind of mental sanity. And I remember in 2011. Loading the last press of Chardonnay, and it being maybe 42 degrees outside, maybe 40, and like physically putting the grapes in the press, and your hands were you couldn't feel your hands by the end of it, and so you're just cold for weeks on end, you're wet for weeks on end. So that's like the type 2 fun of winemaking, where like it sucks when you're doing it, but then you sit down and you look back on what has happened, and it's pretty cool. You can look back on feel like some satisfaction on it. So yeah, I mean there's always at least 1 or 2 moments every vintage where you just like, this is it, I don't want to do this anymore.
Gonna go find an office job with
That's it.
Air conditioner.
That's it. I just put me in a tasting room. It's fine, I don't care anymore.
Did you ever, from the start, once you started getting your education, did you ever seriously consider stopping? Was it all were you kind of hooked from the beginning?
Oh, I have stopped. I have stopped. There was a time after the 14 vintage where I went back to school to study graphic design, and I realized that was a really important moment for me, because I realized like, I'm just gonna have to go through the same set of issues that I'm going through now with another career. Like, it's not gonna change. It's just moving constantly through what you're doing, and time, and just like the writers say, ass in seat. Like just doing the work for long enough and persevering over it. So I'm glad I'm back.
Us too. So tell me about, so after Domaine Drouhin, before that, tell me, kind of take me on the rest of your path up to you starting your own brand.
Well, I worked after I left Drouhin. I lived in New Zealand for a while, and that was another kind of rough time in my life. Like I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. I accepted a job that I wasn't too happy with, so I ended up leaving it about 3 months into it, came back home. But I got the chance to work down in Sonoma at a company or a winery called Hirsch. And they're on the very Sonoma coast. I mean, you can see the Pacific Ocean from the vineyards, for some of the vineyards. And I realized that, like, even though people love to tout that Pinot can only grow very well in these specific pockets, like, yes, I agree with that. But there are many ways to do Pinot. There are many ways to basically, I mean, more than Pinot. There are many ways to make beautiful wine, and you can do it everywhere in the world. And that you need a unique terroir, but you don't need a specific terroir for that. So I really enjoyed that, and it's just what I learned down there was kind of a continuation of the energy I felt at Christum and the energy I felt at Domaine Drouhin. So I thought that was really fun too. So
what made you come back to wine then?
Well, it's Oregon, like this place is incredible. It's so unique to producing the kind of wine it does. And you look at some of the issues that other places have. I mean, Oregon has its own set of issues, but it doesn't have a lot of the issues that other places do. I really believe in non-irrigation of vines, and I really love high acid wines, and I really love wines with fruit and with structure, and sort of a lot of the time wine that I really like is sort of like a spring that's coiled and that will slowly uncoil over the years, and I find that the way that the spring is coiled in Oregon is really, really good. For me, it resonates really well. And the fact that it's still a pretty small community. People are still really friendly and really supportive of each other. That really makes me happy.
So what point did you decide you need to start your own thing?
When I realized that I couldn't work in a winery the way that at the level that other wineries would want me to work at. I need a little more peace. I need to be a little more kind of quiet and calm, and just kind of like choose my own adventure, make my own wine, make my own decisions, make my own mistakes. If the wine isn't the way I intended it to, then that's on me. There's no second guessing. Or there's plenty of second guessing, but there's no second guessing of other people. So, and it feels really good. And also coming from art, like that's process and having something that you create that's your own thing is really kind of cool too. So.
To start your own thing, tell me about the process then of everything, of figuring out what you're going to make, where you're going to make it,
sure,
what your label is going to be, all of that.
Well, so I mean, I think like, at least for myself, like I've been thinking about that since the first day of winemaking school. I've always thought, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to make? Which wines do I resonate with? How do they do it? Let's figure out it, taste the wine, figure out that you like that wine, and then figure out how they make it, and then figure out a way to incorporate that into your own process. And then kind of build this stew of different ingredients to sort of make your own stew with different ingredients from things that you've learned over the years for other people. So yeah, and then a lot of also is just improvisation. You're kind of going, okay, well, this happened, this didn't happen. We've got this now instead of that. What do we do with this? This is what we have. We're in the moment. We got to figure this out. Let's go with this. Great example of that is the 2017 rosé that I have. It was intended to be a still Pinot. The Eagle Creek fire happened. The level of smoke was higher than I wanted it to be, and so I said, okay, we're gonna make a rosé out of it. And that happening, it was a horrible event, but that event changed my view of the vineyard, changed the way I want to make that wine. I've made a rosé. Well, I have not made a Pinot Noir out of it the past 2 years since that event. So just learning to roll with it is really important, because you're gonna get roadblocks and speed bumps and all that stuff.
You talk about finding wines that resonate with you and then trying to kind of reverse engineer them.
Yeah.
So tell me what resonated with you and set you on what you want to make with Alto Cirrus.
Too many to list, but I think a good friend of mine who passed away a couple years ago said, I like drinking medium-bodied, high-acid reds and whites, and I'll add orange and rosé onto that. But when she said it, I was like, yeah, that's it. It's not that difficult. Like, that's what you do. You just, like, you want a wine that is food-friendly, has enough acid to, sort of last over the years and not feel too sweet or too flabby. And you want enough body so that it's, present in your palate, but nothing that's, gonna, like, too light or too heavy. So I just kind of, she said that and I was like, damn, that's right. And I'm really grateful that, we were able to do that. Yeah.
So tell me about your label, about your name.
Okay, so I'm sure some people have said this before, but every wine label that you could ever think of is already taken. So, there were about 1,000 paths that we all went down, and the path that started with ended up with Alto Cirrus was one of our family homes was on a street called Cloudview, and so we're like, oh, let's do something with clouds. It'd be cool to remind us of the home, and so we did about 1,000 different cloud iterations. And my dad came up one day with Alto Cirrus, and I was just like that's it, that's the one. And it works on levels that I still think of, like, I was just thinking about it last week, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense too. So like, I like Alpine wines. I really like Alpine wines. I love wines that are from, Alto Adige, Alto Piemonte, and then, Alp wines, the Syrah, and, there was that restaurant Gruner, and Gruner's whole thing was following the trajectory of the Alps all the way through Europe. So, mountain wines are really cool. And I grew up snowboarding, so I'm, have this sort of like fantasy of like, snowboarding and growing grapes at the same time. Anyway, and then the other thing that I just realized the other day was that New Zealand, the Maori name is Aotearoa, which means land of the long white cloud. So I was like, oh, that ties into the history of New Zealand as well. So I was really stoked at kind of like making that connection. So, I've had people that, like, the original meaning of their label isn't relevant anymore, so then they reinvent it year after year after year. So I think that's kind of cool too. Like, it doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to be, like, it can be fluid. It can be dynamically changing.
So as you make the decision, tell me about sourcing grapes. Tell me about finding a winery space.
Right.
Tell me about all of the logistics that you have to do to get off the ground.
Well, I mean, first off, like, so stoked to be here at Day Camp. What Brianne is doing for us all here is incredible. She's kind of created this incubator that is a really safe, free space for experimentation, for wacky ideas. Like, there's nothing too weird for her, be like, yeah, well, this is what I want to do. I mean, there probably are limits, but but we haven't tested those limits yet. So far, it's been really cool, and just the camaraderie of the campers here, and it's great. It's great. So that has been such an integral part of why the brand has grown the way it has. Sourcing wise, I go back to high acid wines. So wines that do not metabolize their acid slowly. So I try to choose sites that will have the acid that I'm looking for at picking time, so that I don't have to add as much acid as I normally would. And that kind of gets into the natural wine movement right now, and I got a lot of opinions on that. I do think that, like, my wines are less problematic and kind of follow my process better if they are organically grown. I really think that we need to be we need to be farming differently. We need to be farming better. We need to, make. And that being said, there's so many wonderful farmers out there. I'm not saying that everyone needs to do this, but I don't know. But there are certain vineyards that I work with that I'm just like, this has everything I'm looking for. My sort of most high-priced wine I'm just about to release is from Meredith Mitchell Vineyard, and I just love it. It's got its own rooted, it's old vine pomard. It never lacks acidity. It does everything naturally that I want to do from a wine. So I think that vineyard selection is so important for you to sort of symbiotically grow with the wine that you want to produce. Growing the wine is difficult, selling the wine is difficult, making the wine, you just have to not mess it up. That's all that is important.
So you're doing kind of sort of standard Oregon grapes, I guess, for lack of a better word, but you're doing some interesting things with them. So tell me about you talk about some of the experiments, some of the happy accidents, I guess.
Right.
Tell me about some of the things you're doing with your wines.
I mean, I'm not trying to do anything too crazy. I do like, I think we're kind of in this time of non-binary winemaking. So you don't need to follow a certain standard for red wines or red grapes. You don't need to follow a certain standard for white grapes. You kind of can take all those processes and then or plug into it the grape that you want and the process that you want. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to see what we're doing with orange wines. I'm really excited to see what we're doing with sort of rosés that are not an afterthought, but rosés that are like intentional and really like treating a rosé the way you would a Chardonnay or any sort of like really intentional white wine. Mm-hmm. I think that's really cool. I don't know. I mean, I'm really not doing anything too insane and too crazy. I just try to do, but I am skipping a lot of steps. So like I don't really rack my wine ever, unless it's really reductive, and then only if I have to. So I mean, I'll do things, but only as a last resort. Mm-hmm. If the conditions exist for me to do nothing, that's what I'd like to do. Partially because I don't really like doing busy work, but also because like I think that you're only doing those. Well, a lot of times you're doing those things to make the wine better, but also you're doing those things to prevent issues. Mm-hmm. So if you don't need to prevent those issues because they're not there, then you don't need to do them, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, I'm not. There's no dogma for me. I've found a lot of natural winemakers, traditional winemakers, people that really believe their process, which is passion, which is beautiful. But they're not open to other suggestive methods. Mm-hmm. I don't ever want to close myself off from that. If a wine needs to be filtered, if a wine needs, factory yeast, if anything like that, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. To honor the work that has been put into those grapes to get it to that point where they enter the winery. Mm-hmm. It's really disrespectful for me to see someone not honor the hard work that's already happened to the grapes by the time they get to the winery, because 99% of the hard work has been done by then anyways. So that being said, winemaking is still hard.
I want to talk about before we get back to your brand, because I have some more questions about starting, but I'm curious, you talk about giving the wine what it needs and having the kind of the toolbox, the options there. Tell me about developing the confidence to know what a wine needs and to know what it is you can do to help it maximize that potential.
I wouldn't say it's confidence. I would say it's more of a faith issue of I think it'll be okay. Like you need a little bit of luck. You need a little bit of risky behavior to be like we're gonna see what happens on this one. You press a beautiful press load of Chardonnay and then you just put it in a barrel and you're like it will ferment. And there's that moment of like it ferments a couple days later than you want it to, and you're kind of just like oh okay and like so you can always step in and be like okay it's past the time that I'm comfortable with, let's step in. But that comfort level grows every year because it was like I waited 7 days last year, let's try 8 days, let's try 9 days, let's try this, because so I think it's more of like a experiential basis. It's never confidence, but it is an experiential sort of index that you start to build. And then there's also just, palate preference. And I think that's the coolest part about wine, is that it can be all things to all people. There's no one type, and there's no empirical right way to make it. Everyone has their opinion of that way, but there's no way to prove that opinion is the right way to do it. So I like that about it. I like the multiplicity of it.
So getting back to Alto Cirrus and building up, so tell me about first year sort of size and style, and what you've done to expand since then. So
the first year was really small. I only did 2.5 tons of grapes. I did 3 wines from it. And it was very, very much an improvisation. I love the 2017s now, but they freaked me out. I was so scared about releasing them. It took me a 1.5 years to get the kind of momentum to be like, okay, we can release these now. Like these, finally, they're figuring out what they are now. But like the rosé re-fermented in bottle, and the Pinot was so not under extracted, but very lightly extracted that it almost looks like a rosé. Like I always joke to people that I made 3 different rosés in 2017, and but the coolest part is that people dig them. Like I've gotten a lot of orders, I've gotten a lot of reorders. The reorders get me the most excited because they're like, oh, it's gone, I want some more of it. But I think drinkability is very important. So I find that 17s are drinkable. They're delicious. You don't have to take them too seriously, but they're delicious and they're yummy and they're affordably priced. And to me, those are all really good things about wine. I really like wines that are affordable and delicious and drinkable and made honestly. That's cool. But yeah, so I did 3 wines. I did a rosé from Underwood Mountain, I did a Ramato from Underwood Mountain, and I did a Pinot Noir from Leah's Vineyard in the Shale Mountains. The rosé was smoke affected, so there's that aspect of it. It also didn't finish primary fermentation, so it re-fermented in the bottle. So it's a little bit like, it's not a pet nat, but it's like kind of fuzzy, not fizzy, is a joke that I say. And then, I never really liked Pinot Gris that much. So I was like, why am I making Pinot Gris? And I was like, okay, I gotta do something to the Pinot Gris at least to make it something that I'm interested in, rather than just. One criticism I do have of Oregon wine country is that the Pinot Gris has been kind of a bland, ubiquitous, formulaic process. And I think a lot of people are changing that. I think the way Irie has always made Pinot Gris is beautiful. I think the way that Ross Malouf is making wine right now with focusing on Pinot Gris is cool, because he has access to all these amazing vineyards, because no one really wants the Gris. And he's like, yeah, I'll take it. This is great. Like original vine Irie. Yes, sure. Give me some of that. I think that's beautiful. I think that's like a really brilliant way to recreate things. Where was I going? Oh yeah. So and I didn't really like Pinot Gris that much. The Ramato turns out to be one of my favorite wines of the 3. It's a lot of my friends' favorite wine of the 3, and it's really cool. So it's like, okay, you can learn from these things. These preconceptions that you have about wine can change, and you can learn. You can learn from. We're not old dogs yet. We can all learn different things. So yeah. And then, so I've branched out. I've gone against the grain a little bit and focused more on Pinot Noir than a lot of people are. Everyone knows Oregon Pinot doesn't sell in Portland, and it's hard. It's a hard grape, but I love it. I mean, it's why I came to Oregon in the first place. It's, in the right hands, it's just this incredible, beautiful, easy drinking, complex conundrum of a wine. So, I've gone back to that a little bit, but I still do all kinds of weird stuff. Well, not weird stuff, but you know what I mean. Like, yeah, still experiments. I have a skin contact Viognier that I'm trying to figure out right now that is kind of fun. It doesn't taste like a skin contact wine, so I'm like, wow, this is weird. Just trying to figure out what I want to do, what I don't want to do, like re-examining my preconceptions from before, whether I do want to filter the wine, whether I do, whether I do add acid, whether I, all those things. I've definitely come to the point now where I'm only working with biodynamic or organic growers. I had a mentor from Australia just get diagnosed with cancer from glyphosate use, and I just think it needs to go. I'd love to see Oregon live certification be glyphosate free. I think that would be really cool. I don't want to tell people what they can and can't spray in their vineyard, but if it's going to give you cancer, I think it's better for you not to spray it. I think it's better for everyone for that reason. So, that's probably my only soapbox that I'm on right now.
You talked about finding people who responded to your wine. I'm curious. Have you found? Is there a niche that you have? Are there certain people, certain age, certain place, that respond? Or are you finding a fairly good spread of?
Well, it depends. I mean, I think with people that are more conventional wine drinkers, a lot of the wines do challenge. It's a little cloudier than they want. It's a little, weirder than they're expecting.
Fuzzier.
Yeah, a bit fuzzier. Yeah, exactly. But even with those are the ones that I really love drinking the wine with, because they will challenge me and I will challenge them back, and so we'll sort of negotiate a little bit, which is fun. When you go into a situation and someone really doesn't want to like your wine and they come out of it really enjoying it, that feels really good. I love turning no's into yes. That's kind of been a theme in my life. So, but I've gotten some great support from the Portland natural wine scene. I mean, it's been really cool. I just finished doing Portland's, I guess, one of their first natural wine fairs,
right.
The Wild Bunch.
Yeah, just last weekend.
Yeah, and it was really fun. It was really my head's still kind of spinning from it, just because seeing so many people. I mean, I think 600 people came through, and got so many reviews, but a lot of support, and it feels really nice to have the support. It feels really good. I wasn't expecting as much support with it as I'm getting, which makes me really happy. Makes me feel good.
So what's it like starting a brand right? I mean, not right now, but you started in the last 5
years.
Yeah. What's it like starting a brand?
Terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Especially, now with the coronavirus and everything that's going on, and sort of us all almost kind of re-examining what social interaction looks like. I mean, we're not able to go to basketball games anymore this year. That's weird. So yeah, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. I'm kind of thinking I really hope that I'm around in 10 years to be able to keep doing this. But that being said, success for me is being able to make wine again. Every year that I can make wine is a successful year, and it's always been that way before the coronavirus or after. It's just if you can make wine, it's a successful year. And if you can sell enough of the previous vintage or the previous 2 vintages to continue the passion, to continue the journey, to me that's all I'm really looking for right now, at least.
Health fears and scares notwithstanding,
yeah.
What are the other big stumbling blocks for starting a brand right now? Especially starting a small kind of niche brand like you're going with here. What's the market like right now?
I'm really excited about the market right now. It's very pluralistic. It's very broad. There's a lot of different people out there. There's a lot of different voices, and I sort of almost, maybe not, but I like to pretend that it's like CBGB in the 70s in New York, where, hip hop's starting and punk rock is starting and new wave is starting, and all these beautiful styles of music are just in their infancy. And we haven't factioned yet. We haven't gotten too much dogma involved. We're still experimenting. Things are still fresh. And I hope we can keep it that way as long as possible, because the more dogma that's involved, the more factions that grow, the less that our community is going to benefit, in my opinion. So I'm stoked. I've been waiting for this moment in wine for the past 10 years. You know, it's been kind of, there was a seed planted a long time ago that's taken a while to germinate, and I'm really excited to see it germinating now, you know, and growing and thriving. So that's really cool. I'm really stoked about it.
You've talked about both kind of your philosophy of winemaking, kind of the less is more approach, and your willingness to experiment. I'm curious, what's the ultimate takeaway someone could have from a bottle of your wine? You talk about no's and yeses, but I'm curious, what's the ultimate response someone could have to drinking your wine?
Well, so there's a guy in New Zealand that I tasted with, and he goes, I don't want people to talk about my wine when we're sitting around drinking and eating food. Like, I want the wine and the food to springboard into a more interesting conversation. So if you drink a bottle of Alto Cirrus and, you know, fall in love or talk about something really interesting with someone else, or, you know, create a situation that you remember, that's my goal. Scores aren't that important. You know, I've been to so many dinners where we open way more wine than anyone should ever open in one night, and you know, it's all really expensive wine, and you know, it's sort of really ego driven, and then there are other nights where you drink a $5 bottle of Vino Verde, you know, with a salad, and you capture a beautiful moment, and those moments are way more important to me than the ego driven nights. So I think the more we can distance ourselves from ego in the wine community, the better. We'll all be better off for it, so that we can focus on what's really important, which is love and friends and family, and, you know, good moments.
So I come back to something you just talked about a second ago about the kind of the moment, the Oregon wine moment we're in right now, and the seeds being planted. So tell me, what does Oregon wine look like right now in 2020? What is that moment that you're seeing?
Well, it's sort of blurry. I mean, there's no one picture of what it is. I mean, it's so many things to so many people. You know, it depends who you're asking. Depends on you know, the situation that you're talking about, all that stuff. But I think multiplicity is really important, and I think that the fact that it is broad, it's very. It can be broad. I mean, I know there's a group of people that say, you know, we still need to have Pinot Noir be the predominant grape variety. It still needs to be, and it is our bread and butter. I mean, let's be honest with that, and it should be. It's a good grape for the area, but you know, then you get to someone like Chad Stock and him saying, you know, I don't know if Pinot Noir is Oregon's best grape variety, and that's pretty cool too. You know, I think there's room for both of those arguments. I love Willamette Valley Syrah. I think that could be the future. You know, especially if we warm up a little bit. That could, you know, we're actually on a longitude that's closer to the Northern Rhone than it is to Burgundy. So we all love to say that we're on the same parallel as Burgundy, but we're not quite. We're a little bit south of Burgundy. So I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it can be a lot of different things. You know, to me, to us here, to a lot of my peers, it means pushing boundaries. It means changing preconceptions of what wine should be or what wine can be, and it means challenging social norms. And I'm really happy to see those things happening.
So what's it going to look like 10 years from now?
No idea. No clue. I mean, I was listening to NPR the other day, and there's a science fiction writer on, and he said, we don't talk about the future anymore. There is no future the way that there used to be. And it's kind of sad, but it's kind of scary, but we're at this moment where so many things are being challenged, so many things are being dissected and analyzed that we're waiting for the data to come back, and there's still no ability to understand what's coming next, which is scary. It's really scary, but I think we might all be better off for this experience, if we can pull our heads out of our asses and kind of all come together as a single organism like we are.
So what would if you could sort of, your hope, what would you hope Oregon wine is in the future? And maybe what are you afraid it might be?
I mean, I'm not afraid of it being anything. I hope that it's honest, that it is from the heart, that it is driven by beauty and by truth. Well, not truth, I don't like that word. By a passionate opinion, maybe. And just that it doesn't become about production, about monetization, about bottom line only. And that's a very important part of the whole thing. But there needs to be more than that. There needs to be beauty. There needs to be art. There needs to be creativity. So I hope we're able to mix all those elements together to create something that's functional and sustainable.
What about for yourself and your brand as you look ahead? What's next for you and for Alto Cirrus?
Also, I'm not sure. I'm really not. I have a new idea every day, and half of the time I really struggle with seeing myself in America. Right now, I would like to live in a country that's more representative of me. I don't feel very, very seen here, and I don't want to feel like a commodity as much as I do right now. So if we can find a place that in America that that would be perfect. I don't want to leave my family. I don't want to I don't want to see. I want my friends to stay here and be with me and all that stuff. But I mean, I'd seriously consider moving back to New Zealand. But that being said, the grass is always greener, right? So you kind of got to do the best with what you got right here. So I mean, I'd love for Alto Cirrus to grow a little bit, to become self-sustainable, to be profitable, to not have to worry as much about salary and things like that. But right now, like I said before, if I can make wine every year, that's really important to me, and that's really kind of how I gauge my success. So.
Is there something out there that you want to work with that is kind of on the top of the wish list, a varietal or
Oh man,
style?
if I could get some more Chardonnay and some more Syrah, life would be good. If I ever get to the point where I'm planting my own vineyard, I think I would plant Syrah, Chardonnay, Melon, and Gamay. And I wouldn't plant Pinot, not because I don't want to work with it, but because there's so much Pinot already planted that sourcing it doesn't seem to be a problem. But sourcing all those other grape varietals does. And that's in the Willamette Valley. I mean, if I was out in the gorge, there's a vineyard that I've worked with in the past that I'd love to see Norello Mascarlese planted. Mencia is a great variety out there. There's a Spanish white grape called Trechadura that is just beautiful, that I'd love to see more of. I think Chenin is a good grape for out here. But we're doing all those things, which makes me really happy. So that's really cool. That's really cool. And when all else failed, just copy the Syrah. That's all you need to do.
So if someone were to down the line or even now see you as their Steve Dorner, their shining light,
yeah.
They came to you and they asked for advice on running the Oregon wine industry, what would you tell them? What would your words of wisdom be?
Well, so the first day at Christum, Steve looked at me with kind of his smile that he does, and he's one of the most humble people I've ever met, which also adds to his charm, He goes, and I could be making this up. I'm not even sure if he said this, but in my brain, this is what he looks at me and he goes, "You want to know my secret?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" He goes, "I just neglect the hell out of everything, and everything seems to work just fine," which is total bullshit. But it's just his attitude is what I'm saying that really. So, first realizing that you can be your own Steve Dorner. You don't need mentors are very important, and mentors are really incredible for helping you realize your goals, but also just doing it yourself. I'm a punk rocker and I love DIY, I think that's important. So, but I mean, like also just open communication, open dialogue, you know, like not being like, yeah, sure, I can help you. Like, what do you need to know? What are your issues? Let's talk through them. You know, we can all, like, I'm a huge believer in a rising tide floats all boats. That the healthier and the more happy everyone is, the better we're all going to be. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Last question for you. You've kind of touched on it already, but I kind of want you to think about it from this perspective. What is wine's role in society?
Ooh, good question. I love that it's extraneous. We don't need wine. There's like, no one is gonna, they might be a little bit worse off if the wine wasn't there, but like, it's not necessary, you know? Like it's necessary for me to see beauty. It's necessary for me to connect with people. I think the connection that I've had with people when we're drinking wine together and eating good food has been sort of the core of what the role that wine plays for me. But you know, there's also, like, I have to be honest. I think overconsumption of wine is a problem. Like it's not something that we should do a lot of. So I think keeping it sacred is important, and keeping it as something you do on special occasions, or at least only a little bit every day, is really important. You know, like it doesn't need to be a sacrament by any means, but there needs to be some sort of respect and reverence for it. And as long as you're respecting it, I think most of those problems get avoided. Yeah.
That's all the questions that I have for you. Is there anything I should have asked that I didn't?
No,
I didn't cover?
I haven't talked this much in one sitting in a long time. It's pretty cool.
I'm glad we gave you the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. So appreciate your time today.
Yeah.
Appreciate your stories and your
Yeah.
thoughts, and we'll let you off the hook.
Thank you.